All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining our presentation today. I'm going to be talking to you about navigating the data maze, specifically how to make data collection easy. In this world here, it seems like, there's all this data out on the internet. We should be able to get it fairly easily, but it's actually a lot more complicated than you might think. And especially if you have a team of developers and you go and ask them, hey, go collect all of this data, they're going to run into a lot more challenges than you're probably aware of. And I want to give you a bit of context on that. So first, let me just give you a quick introduction to myself. My name is Tim Rasika. I'm a software engineer and I'm a YouTuber. I do all kinds of content online, specifically around software development. I've been developing for about 10 years. And I've worked with Bright Data on a bunch of different projects, specifically web scraping projects, where I show how to collect mass amounts of web data on YouTube, more for a developer audience. But today I'm going to break it down a bit higher level and help you understand how web data can be used in your business and how to make it easier for your team to collect web data. So in this presentation, what I'm going to talk to you about specifically is the common data collection barriers. I'm also going to talk about some tools like the Web Unlocker and the Captcha Solver, which are provided by Bright Data, which really make the lives of developers and your teams significantly easier. It makes it so you don't need to build out all this complex infrastructure and tooling in-house. Lastly, we're going to talk about how to generate insights for your business. So it's great to have all of this web data, but how do we actually turn data into information and use it in a meaningful way to generate more revenue, have insights, etc. So let's start with some of the data collection barriers, things that you're going to run into if you're trying to collect web data. First one here, dynamic content. Content is changing constantly on the web. When you go to a website, you could have pop-ups, you could have different media, the structure of the website could change, and that makes it really difficult to write automatic scripts that can go to the website and collect that data. So it might look like, again, super easy, but when things are constantly changing around, that means your developers also need to be changing their code. And it's really difficult to collect that data. So complex extraction, especially if you want to capture data in real time where prices are changing constantly, specifically in e-commerce settings, it's really challenging to do that. Next, anti-scraping technology. So all these huge companies like the ones you see in here, Amazon, Shopify, etc., they know how valuable their data is and that we're trying to collect it, and they don't want to allow you to do that. So they have all kinds of complex anti-scraping mechanisms where they can actually detect if bots are on the site. They may ban your IP address. They may look for certain behavior. And that means as a developer, you need to write really complicated scripts that can mimic human behavior. And it's just a lot more challenging than simply going and navigating to the website and pulling all of the different data. Companies really don't want you to access their data, and it's getting more and more challenging as the years go on. There's also a lot of legal and ethical considerations. You can scrape data that's public on the internet for sure, but the way in which you do it could be problematic, and it's something that you need to consider as a business. So this is an example of something you might encounter, right? We want to go to Walmart, we want to scrape some data, and pretty much this is what they're doing. This is what they're doing to your team. They're putting up the bouncer, they're saying, no, you can't come through, and you have to find a way to navigate through that, right? Now, the next one we have is CAPTCHAs. This is something that we've probably all seen and experienced before. Even as a human, CAPTCHAs can be difficult to solve. And as a developer, it's an absolute nightmare. We don't know when CAPTCHAs are going to occur, if they're going to occur, the type of CAPTCHAs that we're going to have. And we need a way to automatically solve them and to get by them. And that drastically impacts the scalability and really interrupts the automation flow that we're going to have when we're trying to collect data. So this is what your team's going to be dealing with. Even if you don't see it firsthand, they're going to be encountering it pretty much every single time they try to collect data. So here's an example of a CAPTCHA you might encounter. I'd ask you guys, can you help me solve this CAPTCHA? Just kind of a joke, but the idea is already for humans, this is difficult enough. So you can imagine for developers, how do we get by all these complex CAPTCHAs? We obviously don't want to be doing it manually. We need an automatic solution for that, which I'll get to later in this presentation. Next, JavaScript heavy websites. You may not even know what that is, but this is a programming language, mostly on the front end, on the user interface. A lot of times websites don't load immediately. They have dynamic content that's loaded by scripts that are running in the background. And that can be intentional because they want to actually make sure you're using a real browser, not kind of a bot browser or a fake browser. So just something we need to deal with. We need some more advanced tools to be able to load all of the content on the site and actually get the data that we're looking for. And then lastly, probably the most challenging one that your team's going to run into and the hardest to solve in-house is rate limiting and IP blocks. So you may have even encountered this before. If you try to refresh a site hundreds of times, it's going to say, hey, we think you're a bot. We're limiting your traffic. Come back and try again in a few minutes. Worst case scenario, if you keep doing this, they may actually find your IP address and just completely blacklist it from the site, which means if you're on that machine, you're just out of luck. You can't access the site. So even if you have a bunch of cloud servers, you're pushing this up to AWS or using an Azure service from Microsoft, you could be banned, that IP address could be blacklisted, and that's a huge nightmare for developers. So these are some of the images that I've personally seen when I've tried to collect web data. This is what your team has probably seen as well. You might not see it yourself, but they're dealing with this and it's an absolute nightmare. We have captchas, access denied, banned IP addresses, random errors that we don't even understand. And as a developer, what you want to do is very quickly be able to collect data. You want to write code, which is what you're good at. You don't want to be dealing with all these complexities that just aren't even supposed to be a part of your job, right? And again, this is what your team and really anyone, including myself, is going to run into when you're trying to collect a mass amount of data. So what I want to do now is just show you a quick demo of how challenging it can actually be. What you might see is, okay, we have like a simple captcha here, right? And you might think, well, it should be simple enough to just go and press on this button that says, I'm not a robot. But you're going to see in this quick demo that from some basic code, it's actually a lot more challenging than it seems to do that. So we have the Google Captcha. Seems simple enough. As a human, what you would do is go press on the button, click on submit, brings you to some kind of success page. Now, obviously, if you don't press on the button, it's going to say, hey, we think you're a robot. You can't proceed. So what I'm going to do now is just show you a little bit of a code snippet. You don't need to understand what this code is, but I just want you to understand what your team is going to be doing and what they're going to be writing so that you can see the importance of the solutions we're going to get into in a second. So let's run this for a second here. And you'll see that really what we're going to attempt to do here in this line, I think it's going to highlight it for us in a second here, is we're going to try to find that CAPTCHA box, that little button. And we're going to try to press on that from code automatically. And then after we do that, then we're going to attempt to press the submit button. Again, seems really simple, but you're going to see when I actually execute this code that I'm not able to get by it. So let's look at the execution here. And you can see I kind of run through, I get an error, and then down here it says, please verify that you're not a robot. So again, a seemingly very simple thing automatically sets up a roadblock for me and makes it difficult for me to do what I'm good at, which is coding, not solving CAPTCHAs and all of these complex web things. Let's go to the next one. So what is the solution, you might ask? Well, there's actually a bunch of different things that we need to be able to get by these kind of blocks. First would be something like browser fingerprinting. Again, you don't need to know the complexities here, but this means kind of spoofing the browser and pretending like we're a real human browser. We're not kind of a fake robot browser that's running in the background. Next, CAPTCHA solving. As you just saw, we need a way to determine if a CAPTCHA exists and then to solve that CAPTCHA automatically and to have that work for all the different types of CAPTCHAs, like the proprietary Amazon ones, the ones provided by Google, like the Captcha there, and any new ones that are coming out. Then IP rotation. So as we talked about before, your IP address could be banned. That means we need to switch the IP addresses, rotate them, change them. Not something that your developers or really anyone wants to deal with, so we should let someone else handle that for us. Request retries. We need to retry actually accessing the website. We've seen as humans, we access a website, content doesn't load. Same thing's going to happen for bots, especially when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of pages, right? Proxy management, we can access things from different locations. We can see the price in Canada versus the US versus Australia, see if there's any arbitrage there. And then JavaScript rendering, loading the web page, right? So what I'm going to do now, if this goes to the next page here, is show you a demo of how we can get by this CAPTCHA and how we just make a really, really slight change and implement a bright data solution. And it kind of just fixes all of those problems for us. As the developer, we don't need to know what's happening in the background. We just make this slight change and all of a sudden we can move forward and start collecting data. So let's run through this here. Again, don't get too confused here with all the code on the screen. I'm just trying to show you what your team is going to be doing so you have some context. So what we do here is we connect to the Bright Data browser. So rather than doing this on our local computer, we push it out and we let Bright Data handle the complexity. And then we just write a really simple line of code. All your developers be able to do this very easily, where we just look if a CAPTCHA exists and then we attempt to solve it. Now this is running on that same example you saw before. And you'll see that when I execute this, we go to the site, it takes a second, solves the CAPTCHA, and then you'll see that we're actually able to get to that success page. So really, really simple implementation. And now all of a sudden we can move on to collecting that data and we're not blocked by a CAPTCHA. Let's go to this. All right. So now what I want to do is talk to you about some of the bright data solutions that solve all of those problems we just talked about, right? Dynamic content, IP address blocks. These take care of all of it, and we don't need to even know really what's going on in the background. We just connect to them, and everything is smooth sailing, and your developers will thank you. So, for example, the Web Unlocker, that's what we just used, which allowed us to actually navigate that site and get past the CAPTCHA. It has all kinds of features. We don't need to go through all of them, but browser fingerprinting, CAPTCHA solving, handling the cookies, JavaScript rendering, it pretty much just connects everything that we need in one solution and makes it really easy to connect to. We also have the CAPTCHA solver. Now this for me is one of probably the most important tools that I need to use on a day-to-day. And this is built into the Web Unlocker and some of the other tools where it just automatically solves CAPTCHAs for you. So when you go to a site, it will detect if any CAPTCHAs exist. If they exist, it will determine what type out of all the different ones that could occur. And then it will just automatically solve the CAPTCHA, move you forward, and let you do what you're good at, which is writing code and collecting the data, not dealing with CAPTCHAs. It also does some user emulation and all these fancy terms that we don't even need to understand. Now we have another solution, and this is kind of the step up from what we just talked about with the Web Unlocker, and this is known as the scraping browser. Now, sometimes when we're interacting with websites, we have some more complex interactions that we need to do. We're not just going to look at all of the code on the page. We may need to press a button. We may need to click into a form. We may need to load a video or some content. For example, maybe you're on Amazon and you want to actually click into the product and you want to maybe load up the video. You want to see the different images they have. There's just a bunch of different user actions we may want to perform, and we can't do that in a standard kind of bot-based browser. So this is an additional tool provided from Bright Data called the scraping browser that gives us that ability. So it has the Web Unlocker, it has the CAPTCHA solver, and it lets us interact with the site and navigate it in a way that's very similar to a human so that we can emulate what a normal human might do on the website. Now, from the development side, this integrates with very popular frameworks that your team probably already uses, like Puppeteer, Playwright, and Selenium. So there's no major learning curve, there's no big change. They just simply connect to this browser and they can use what they're already good at using. And it just, again, takes away all of those issues that they've dealt with before on their local machine. Now, what I'm gonna do here is show you an example of an application that I actually built. So I teamed up with Bright Data a while ago and we wanted to create something that could scrape a ton of different pages and products on sites like Amazon, Newegg, Wayfair, etc. And in this example here, what you're gonna see is scraping a site called Newegg. So Newegg is for all kinds of tech products. I'm a tech guy. I like tech stuff, CPUs, GPUs, building computers. So that's why I wanted to do it here. And what you'll see on the left-hand side is that we have a few different products that I've already scraped. And let's just have a look at the demo and I can kind of run you through it step by step. So what you'll see is that I can press on one of the products and I get kind of a tabulated list here of all of the different prices at the time that I scraped them. And let's just pause this for a second. And you'll see that as I scrape this multiple times, there's all kinds of different price changes that are occurring. And this is just within a few hours or a few days. So even as a consumer, someone who's maybe not even using all this e-commerce data, this is still extremely valuable for me because over a few days, I can see when the price is the lowest and I can go in and I can buy something on sale, or I can get it for, in this case, you can see 34% off, 22% off, or actually, sorry, those are increases, but the green ones, 20% down, right? So you can imagine as a business, what kind of insights you could get by tracking all of these different price changes. And I'll kind of show you how the tool works, but this is just an example. Oops, let's go back here. Sorry, so we're just kind of rewatching through it for a second. We can click in, we can see different price changes. And then we can actually click into an individual product and we can view the price history of that product itself. Now, this is something I built myself. I'm not a full team of developers. I'm working in my basement. So you can imagine you have your own internal team. They have multiple weeks, months to work on a project. What could they create if this is what one solo developer can do? Now, I just want to rewind for a second just so I can talk about how this works. So this is a nice kind of user interface, right? You guys could use this. You don't need to be a developer to interact with it. And what I've done here is I've just typed in DDR5 RAM. It's just a tech component, right? That's sold all over the place. I want to show you what happens in the background when I actually do that and how we collect and extract the data to kind of bring it into this nice view. So when I press Start Scraper here, you'll see that what's actually going to happen is it's going to go and connect to my backend. Now, this is a funky server thing that your developers will be writing. But what we're going to do in background is we're going to connect to the Bright Data browser, which is what we're doing right here. And then we're going to navigate to the page. Let me just pause this for a second. You'll see that we'll detect if there's any CAPTCHAs. If there is any there, we're automatically going to solve them. We're going to actually go on the page and type in the search bar DDR5 RAM, just like a normal human would, so we don't get detected as a bot. And then we're going to press the search button, and we're going to wait a second for all of the results to load. So we're going to retrieve all of the different products. You can see it kind of spits them out. And right here, I know it's a bit difficult to see. We had 31 products on page 1. We save the results, and then we simply send it back so that we can view. Now, again, remember, this is just one developer building this out. So your team could obviously do a much better job if they had multiple people. They're going to spend more time on it. They can make it look a little bit better than my little application here. Kind of a good proof of concept and shows you what's possible even as a single person. And this is one of the results that we just pulled, just as an example. Now, what I want to do is kind of bring this full circle. So we've learned about what the challenges are, some of the solutions, but what does this actually mean for you as a business, right? Let's say you didn't have some of the tools that I just showed you here. and you wanted to do everything in-house. You wanted to scrape tons of different pieces of data, and you wanted to get all the e-commerce information that you need. What do you need? Well, you need to maintain complex infrastructure. You're gonna have all kinds of different machines. You're gonna have different IP addresses, different servers. That alone is a full-time job for a developer, someone probably even more experienced than me. And that's gonna be 80, 100K, probably even more than that per year. This isn't a junior level thing that you can just hire some intern to do. This is a full-time job and requires someone with a lot of expertise and knowledge to be able to handle. Things like manual IP address rotation, not something any developer really wants to deal with. Conditional rendering, advanced error handling, there's all this stuff. You shouldn't even know what it means, but the point is if you had to do this in-house, you are gonna have to build in those capabilities and it's gonna cost you significantly more and also just be harder to understand the pricing, right? So here with Bright Data, all of this happens instantly for you. It's easy to use, your developers can hook into it. And let's go to the next slide here. So again, what does this mean for you? Well, the biggest thing that I like from these type of tools is that it allows me to really quickly build something out. So let's say you want to just collect maybe a few hundred pages of data. You want to just test something out, get some quick insights. You're not sure if this is what you're going to do for your whole business, but you just want quick experimentation. With these kind of tools, you can do that. You don't need a ton of developers in-house. This isn't a huge project that requires advanced planning. You can go and use one of the tools and build an app like I just showed you in a few hours, right? And kind of see if you want to pursue that anymore. Minimal developer resources. Maybe you do already have a developer team. Maybe you don't. Regardless, you're still able to do this. You're able to compete with bigger companies because you have access to these tools. And you can, again, focus on using data and not collecting it, right? All we really care about is the data itself, gathering insights from that. We shouldn't be a company who's so focused on this mass collection, right? We want to actually utilize the data. Maximum flexibility for developers, as I talked about, really easy to utilize this. And a few other ones here, right? We can quickly identify trends. We can track our competitors. You guys know what you will do with this data, but that's the idea. So that is my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed.